Colonel Jack Mosher of the Maine Army National Guard. Colonel Mosher has served 22 years in the Maine Army National Guard. He has lived here his whole life in Maine. He's originally from Burnham. He went to MCI High School. He was a Boys State delegate in 1982. He served in just about every position in the National Guard in leadership position that you can possibly think of, from all the way from the platoon level to now all up to the state command level. He is a graduate of the University of Maine ROTC program. Several courses, professional development courses offered through the military, including the Infantry Officer Basic Course, the Infantry Advanced Course, the Combined Armed Staff Services School, the Command and General Staff College, the Joint Combined Warfighting School, the Joint Task Force Commanders Course, the United States Army War College, to name a few. He has 2 master's degrees in educational leadership and 1 in international strategic studies. Those are from the University of Maine and also the War College. His several awards that he's earned in the military include the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medals for Valor and Service, the Meritorious Service Medals, the Combat Infantryman's Badge. He's also one of the few members of the Maine Army National Guard that has completed the Ranger course. He's airborne qualified, and I'm skipping many of them, but just suffice it to say that Colonel Mosher is probably the most, if not, he's certainly one of the top decorated leaders and officers that we have in the Maine Army National Guard. I was fortunate enough myself to serve with him. I served with him in the 52nd Troop Command when I was in the Maine Army National Guard. And I can tell you that Colonel Mosher is a great leader, and he's going to talk to you about some issues tonight that I think you'll find of interest. He knows how to lead. He knows what it takes to succeed and achieve, and he knows how to take care of the people that is under his command. In addition to all of his accolades, I also want to mention that Colonel Mosher is very involved on another side of his life with promoting issues of health awareness, and he does that through a few organizations that he's founded and is a member of that compete in various long endurance training, marathon running events to promote wellness and health issues. He's competed in several marathons, one of which he did was a 21 team marathons in 21 days, a 550.2 mile ultra run from Kittery to Arlington National Cemetery. In May 2011, Colonel Mosher and his team completed 21 marathons running around the clock for 5 days on the Washington, D.C. Capitol Mall to continue to raise awareness on issues related to behavioral health treatment in veterans populations. He's got more running events planned, several more that he's done that I haven't mentioned, and more planned in the future. For this year, I'm told that he plans to run 125 the kilometer length of Long Island in the Bahamas to continue to promote issues of health and awareness. We're lucky to have him here tonight, and I want you to know that Colonel Mosher is third in command of the Maine Army National Guard, and his title is Chief of Staff, and he can tell you more about that when he talks to you tonight. It's my pleasure to welcome, please give a warm welcome to Colonel Jack Mosher. Bam!
My name is Colonel Jack Mosher. I come from the small town of Burnham, not too far from here. I grew up there. The son of a high school math teacher and a stay-at-home mom. I went to Maine Central Institute, graduated in 1983. The year before, I attended Boys State, just like you are now. I've greatly looked forward to coming talking to you today to see the future of America's leadership, particularly from Maine, and talk to you about what good governance means not only in Maine and in America and in the world, but your role in saving the free world as we know it now. Not to put too much responsibility on you before dinner. They say that if you're going to have to speak, particularly to young men, you never want to do the before dinner crowd or the after dinner crowd. And I got both tonight, so we'll see how we do. But we're going to talk to you on several subjects and try to save some time at the end for your questions. And I know I'm being recorded now, so it's going to be an attribution environment. I'll try to keep my language as clean as possible and remain professional. This is not always easy. We'll start with a little poem here, America the Beautiful. Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years, thine alabaster cities gleam undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Boys State for me was an awakening. As a junior at the time, becoming a senior, I'd been, a co-captain of my football teams and wrestling teams, and was the class president of my class, and kind of understood some of the fundamentals of leadership, but didn't really understand how this great experiment, this great promise we call the American dream really worked. Coming to Boys State made me understand kind of the intricacies of governance and what a constitution is and what representative democracies mean and what my role as a leader would be in that in the future. It also alerted me as to the tremendous responsibility we have to our fellow citizens when we take on those roles and the moral obligation that we have to lead. It is part of our motto in Maine, which we're going to talk about toward the end of my little spiel here, Dirigo, which in the active voice means what? I lead. How many states in the nation have an active voice directive to their citizenry in their very motto? One. That's the state of Maine. Hence, as Maine goes, so goes the nation. We have been a seedbed of leadership for our nation since Maine was founded in 1820. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that too. Talk about good governance, going to tell you some war stories. Then we're going to talk about you for a while and some of the challenges that you and your generation have. It's probably not going to make me the popular speaker of the night for you, but we're going to have an honest conversation about it. And I think it's important that we, as men, discuss these matters for our generation that we have right now, because you have some challenges ahead of you. These are not anecdotal factors, but proven statistical studies right now about where you guys sit as a generation, and we want to talk about that very briefly, and I'll leave you with some challenges. As I said, it's your responsibility to save the free world. Okay. So what is your role in this grand experiment? I've taken some notes here tonight because I want to make sure I get my statistics straight and just stay on track. I tend to get off in telling some stories. I don't want to do that too much tonight because I don't have that much time. But the truth of the matter is that civility in society is a fairly rare thing. And you can see this looking at the elements of history. I mean, you don't have to go very far in the world to understand that removing creature comforts from society and placing hardship and stress on society very quickly strips away those elements called civility. In many ways, governance is that which protects us from ourselves, and the role of nature and in survival. We can say that those special groups that work together survive better. Again, from a purely natural perspective, wolves that hunt together survive better. Elephant clans that remain close and under leadership survive better. Societies that work better under governance survive better, don't they? Right. So, better systems of government produce better societies that are more productive and provide better standards of living for their citizenry. The Mayflower Compact, which of course was written in 1620, as our forefathers arrived at Cape Cod in the fall of that year under tremendously difficult conditions, did what? It set about a common understanding and expectation of social responsibility for each other. In that case, for true survival. I mean, landing in New England in November with nothing but a forest staring at you aboard a tiny little ship is a daunting task for anybody at that time. And they paid for it with their lives. Many of them didn't make it through the winters, you know. But the Mayflower Compact was the beginning of that aspect of social responsibility and the beginning of governance and taking responsibility for each other in society. So hundreds of years later, we've evolved, right? We're much better than that now. We don't need that type of governance to survive anymore. We have houses, we have electricity, we have solar, we have all kinds of things to take care of us. Is that true? No, it's not true. As I just told you, that you strip away those aspects, you see the elements of nature coming out. How many of you remember the hurricane in the Gulf back in 2005, Hurricane Katrina? All right, good. Just a frame of reference. The Maine Army National Guard sent down an engineer battalion to assist in Hurricane Katrina down to the New Orleans area in an aviation detachment to provide medevac and other types of services. I went down as one of the officers in charge and had a front row seat at two examples of nature gone awry with poor governance and good governance, one in each hand. And you have to remember that Hurricane Katrina didn't hit New Orleans directly. It actually hit Mississippi, right? The worst epicenter of that storm came ashore in Mississippi. And the devastation was incredible. I mean, absolutely leveled entire communities. It was a horrible humanitarian event. However, if you flew over the devastation in a Black Hawk helicopter, as I did, you could see visually the difference between good governance and poor governance and the toll it exacted upon the civilian population there. Mississippians had immediately begun working together under the local and regional government, established burn piles for all the debris and the clearing of their land, and you could see all the burning piles of this debris. It's very important initially to clear that because of fungal, the types of disease and stuff that comes out of that type of stagnant water. You get waterborne diseases, so you want to very quickly drain and get rid of all the moldy areas and stuff like that. So that's what they were doing. And you could see a line of those burn pits right along the Louisiana border, because unlike Mississippi, in Louisiana, they didn't have that local government in control. It was rife with corruption and self-interest and not taking care of the local population. So much so that when we arrived, the local leadership fenced off entire neighborhoods for the contractors that would come in weeks, in some cases months later, to provide the basic services that the population needed, forsaking the thousands and thousands of National Guard soldiers that we had there that could do the exact same thing for the purpose of profiteering. So you literally had entire platoons of master electricians, bulldozer operators, plumbers, standing there, not allowed to go into those neighborhoods and restore power and water because people were more interested in being paid by the government than providing the basic services to the community. It's a very sad situation because people suffered because of that, suffered unnecessarily because of that. We responded to that disaster with over 50,000 National Guard members. It was a rude awakening for many of our main soldiers to go down and see something like that happen, something that we would never experience here in our own state when we have floods such as the ice storm of '98, the Patriots Day flood, Rooster County floods, all of these other types of events where we respond very quickly to the local communities. In a more extreme manner, let's look at Afghanistan. In the fall of 2003, let's check one. In the fall of 2003, I left Maine as a member of a 63-man group to go to Afghanistan. I spent about a month at Fort Carson, Colorado, acclimating to the altitude, which is about 6,500 feet there, which is the same as the Afghan plain. And on a very dark night, at about 03, that's 3 o'clock in the morning, we flew out of Kyrgyzstan, Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, on a C-130, blacked out, over the Hindu Kush Mountains, and into Kabul International Airport. Kabul, or Kabul, is the largest city in Afghanistan, huge city, big city. Completely black. We landed in kind of controlled crash. Then spun the plane around, dropped the ramp. We went out the back, didn't even turn the engines up, the ramp up, and they were gone. We were left standing there in the middle of the airfield, in the dark. Now, this is a huge, massive, industrialized city without a single light on at that time. At this point, the Afghan people had gone through the Soviet occupation, they'd gone through the follow-on communist regime, then the Civil War, then the Taliban, and then the fall of the Taliban and the occupation of the American Army and NATO forces and everybody else. So at this point, the Taliban had just fallen, Northern Alliance was still in full swing there, and it was the post-war status of the country after about 30 years of uninterrupted, continuous combat in this entire society. And what you had was total darkness. Despite this massive city with total darkness, what you smelled was this acrid Pakistani wood fire, burning post-apocalyptic sort of darkness throughout the entire city. We moved to our forward operating base and began to operate there. And what I learned in watching, what followed in the months after our arrival was essentially the birth of a new democracy, which began with what's called the Voyagerga. And that was the development of the Constitution, which was a representative Islamic democracy in this case. And then voting, where they get to select their leadership using local representation. And the idea of self-determination was introduced to a society that had never had that before. They subscribed to kind of a higher power of determination where they never been asked who to want to lead you. So the idea of running for office is totally separate. It caught on very quickly when we began handing out voter cards, which you got your picture on. You took a picture of a person, voter card, put a thumbprint on it, because 80% of literacy there, and began to vote locally, and then up into regions, and then eventually to the national elections. Well, this was against a lot of the really fundamentalist Islamic regime people at the time, and there was a lot of people who didn't want this to happen, and they would murder anybody with a voter card. If you were caught with a voter card, you would be killed. And they would go on the buses on the Jalalabad Road, take people off buses, check them for voter cards, and suddenly execute them alongside the road. And you would think that this would discourage people from showing up to vote, because you're basically betting your life to go and vote. And by the way, many of the voters were women who had never had a partner in society up to that point, at least in the last 20 years. So they would have to lie to their husbands or travel many, many miles, 20, 30 miles on foot to go to these places to vote. Well, to kind of bring it to a point, the voting poll locations, which are all over the country, and it was all by manual vote because there was no power, everything was done on a ballot, would have riots there because people were afraid they would lose their chance to vote. So we'd have to have security in place to make sure that everything went fine. Their voter registration rate and execution rate was higher than America's at the time, if you can believe it. And people were literally risking their lives to go and vote for their democratically selected officials. It worked out very well. What happened since then we can talk about later. But what I learned by watching that is that the delight of that freedom and self-determination is something that people don't relinquish once they've had a taste of that. Once they understand that, it won't go away. Whether or not we're successful in Afghanistan, there will be an entire generation of Afghans that understand and know what that means now. And that is an inextinguishable light, as I said before. If you look at America, the beginning of America in particular, were we so different, really? Breaking away from Britain, forming our own country, writing our own constitution, and coming back to, again, good governance within our own society. Your role in our future is defined largely by the roles of strategic leaders in the past. Always in America's history, particularly during these moments of what I call strategic crossroads, those defining moments where America's future may not have been so certain. And you can think of a lot of these moments, just World War II, the Civil War, periods of great economic crisis. Always in American history, strategic leaders step forward to lead the country to a better place. And this requires a certain set of skills, and the skills that you should be beginning to work on now. If you look at, for example, FDR during World War II, weeks after the Pearl Harbor attack, he's addressing Congress, and he outlines, not only for America, but for the entire world, the 4 fundamental freedoms of any society. Who can tell me what those 4 freedoms are? They were immortalized with the Norman Rockwell paintings that followed, but give me one of them.
Freedom from fear.
Freedom from fear was one of them, which was fairly timely at the time, wasn't it? Having just been attacked on the eve of a great world war. If you look at the painting, and you should look these up if you've never seen them, they're quite moving. You see a father and a mother putting their children to bed, and then the father's holding a newspaper which has the Pearl Harbor attack written on the outside of it. Does freedom from fear resonate now with us in a climate of terrorism, attacks on our home shores? How many people were here for the Boston Marathon? Anybody there for the Boston Marathon? I was. It's quite a remarkable thing to be standing on Boylston Street in a city you've been in 150 times in your life and watching your own countrymen running up and down the street through the smoke, through the chaos, and people who are just absolutely innocent. If you've ever been, how many people have ever run a marathon here? You run a marathon?
Run one.
Good. Outstanding. I challenge every one of you to grab your character and run a marathon. Every person should run a marathon at least once, because it's that aspect that goes beyond your natural ability and really tests your character. Anyway, if you go to a marathon, it's a climate of great joy and participation. A lot of families, kids holding up signs, and this was the case on a beautiful morning on the Boston Marathon. Very, very seldom, the oldest marathons in the country. And that was shattered, of course, when those two bombs detonated. We don't need to talk too much about that, but freedom from fear is a very important aspect of where we sit right now. Give me another freedom that FDR talked about.
Freedom from want.
Freedom from want. We can talk a lot about these freedoms. Basically, what we're talking about is to each his own, based on his own effort, his own education, his own desire to succeed, that you will not be discriminated against or set back from in a spirit of equal opportunity for that success. Again, something that is not universal throughout the world. What's the third? Freedom to worship. Very close. Freedom to worship or not. Despite the fact that our country is largely founded on the basis of religion, our forefathers knew that that could be a dangerous thing as well. And freedom to worship, each according to their own creed and their own belief system, is a very important part of what we do here. What's the final?
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech. Excellent. Excellent. I'm going to talk about freedom of speech in a little while here as I kind of moved. How much time do I have right now, Derek?
You're almost at the 10-minute mark.
Okay. I'm going to move quickly to some final conclusions here, but freedom of speech. Really important that people be able to speak their mind, speak their heart, without fear of recrimination, without an McCarthy-esque alienation, or being able to hold your government accountable. It's very fundamental, and it's something I'm particularly worried about in America right now. I think that people need to be able to speak their mind, be able to speak their hearts without fear of recrimination. I'm going to close quickly then and take some questions from you. I believe that there's basically 4 things that you need to be able to do as future leaders in Maine. And I learned these when I was in high school. I was very fortunate to get a great education at Maine Central Institute. I serve on the Board of Trustees there now. The first and most dire need of current leadership is the ability to read, write, and speak effectively. Somehow the ability to speak in America has greatly declined. I don't know if it's because of the technology we have or what, but even people who speak for a living, professional politicians, other people have really declined in their ability to speak effectively and to write and read effectively. I've got people with master's degrees that work for me in my private businesses that can barely write a letter. You see a lot of politicians out there speaking now. They're just frankly not very articulate, and it's a huge drawback if you can't stand up in front of your peers and make your point in a succinct and articulate manner in a way that moves them, inspires them to action. If you can't do this, it's going to be a great problem for you in the future. You need to practice it as often as you can. The second, which I think is really, really important as well, is to be able to think critically, to develop your own educated opinion, and then to stand on your convictions, to be able to do the research and study the primary sources, seek those experiences that educate you, and develop your own opinions. Not taking what your buddies are obviously doing or what you're being told. Go out and find out for yourself. This takes a certain amount of courage. Go see. Go find out. Travel. Go to other countries. Talk to people in prison. Talk to people who are poor. Talk to people who are wealthy. Talk to as many different people as you can to formulate your own opinions, and then have broad shoulders and thick skin and stand on your convictions despite the adversity and scrutiny you fall under. This is part of becoming a man, when you stand up for what you believe in the tide of tremendous scrutiny and criticism. A lot of people don't know how to do that. Doesn't mean that you're inflexible and you can't have your mind changed, But once you've made up your mind on something and you've decided through an educated, intellectually responsible position, stand up for your convictions. Stand as a majority of one. Many times in American history, our leaders have had to do this, where they stand alone for what was right for the country. I encourage you to read a book called Presidential Courage. You can find it on Amazon. It has countless examples of our key strategic leaders, our presidents, making those calls under tremendous pressure when they needed to for the betterment of the country. The last thing that I'll tell you, I was doing some master's thesis defenses up at the University of Maine a couple weeks ago, and I was questioning this young student, brilliant young woman who had a beautiful, incredible thesis. But she was quoting some poetry and some other stuff, and I asked her, she was talking about the role of fear as a motivating force. And I asked her, what is more powerful, love or fear? What is the more powerful motivating force? And I was shocked when this gem of our society, a future leader, turned to me and said, well, it would be fear. I can tell you from personal experience, through countless examples, again, in American history, where fear is a very poor motivational tool. Love will always overcome fear. You can see that in infantry platoons. You can see it on Boylston Street, the Boston Massacre. You can see it at Tiananmen Square in 1989 when an individual holding his jacket stood in front of tanks. Do you remember that? Did you ever see those pictures? Famous picture of the guy standing there, sidestepping a tank that's trying to get around him. Love will always overcome fear. In closing, I'm not going to criticize your generation too much because you have an amazing generation. Every generation is defined by the task before it. Your tasks will be weighty, I promise you that. Your tasks will define the future of our country. I challenge you to be the next greatest generation, to be true to your word, to be true to your deed, and to follow the motto of the state of Maine. What star is on our seal? What is it?
North Star.
The North Star. Polaris. What's special about the North Star?
It never moves.
It never moves. You can always find your way back to Maine, excuse me, by following the North Star. And wherever you travel in the world, you're going to find your way to come back to this special place that we call Maine. And it'll be a bedrock of your future, I promise you that. And I encourage you to go and find your place in the world. Go out everywhere you can to travel. But remember that Maine, like much of America, is a very special place to have come from. I'm very proud of your generation, that I've seen some amazing things in guys not much older than you, doing God's work all over the world in places that you wouldn't believe. Serve in part of something greater than yourself. It doesn't have to be in the military. Be a teacher, be a carpenter, be a leader in your communities, be good dads, and do your absolute best in everything that you do. And that your proficiency defines you. Okay. I will close by reminding you that each of you is precious, irreplaceable, and a future national treasure. Your generation is challenged right now. You're the first generation in American history that has a lower life expectancy than the one before it. Do you know that? Reported by the CDC because of sedentary lifestyles, diet, anxiety, and stress. By the time you graduate from college, you will constitute barely 40% of college graduates. And don't mistake my discussion here. I am not marginalizing or diminishing the incredible accomplishments of young women out there right now. But we have a generation of young men that's underachieving right now. And I'm telling this to you guys because you're clearly the best your school has to offer. You are the future of our state and our country. But you need to bring your brothers with you. motivate them to get out there and be a part of this. It disturbs me greatly that men your age commit suicide at 4 times the rate of women. Concerns me that you spend an average of 2.5 hours a day playing video games. These are things that should concern you too. And your leadership by example is sorely needed in a country that's desperate for your leadership, in a world that needs you that badly. I'm going to stop here right now and I'll answer any questions that you have, and then we'll move to our final conclusions. You can ask me about anything you want. Talk about Afghanistan, talk about the military, talk about, what do you got?
What's the book name?
It's called Presidential Courage. I can't remember the author. It's a very historically based book, and it gives you some awesome examples from many different perspectives of strategic leadership at critical times in American history. Yes?
What's your opinion on the military?
My opinion on the military? Good question. I have 3 boys, and I'm obviously very proud of them. They're good athletes. They're good students. They're 13 and 12 and 5, and I've thought about whether they should join the military or not. I don't run my house as a military home. I run it as a teacher's home because I'm first and foremost a teacher. But I've thought about that a lot. I'm glad you asked that question. I think the military is a great place. I think it's taken this kid from Burnham, Maine, and showed me the world. The military is not who I am. The military in my life is actually a very small part of my life. I'm a good dad. I'm a successful businessman. I'm involved in my community. But the military has been a great place for me to exercise my leadership and see some pretty incredible things in this world and being a part of something that's much larger than I am. And I'll be retiring from the military in a few years, and I'll always cherish that. But I believe that you can serve your country in many different capacities other than the military. The military is a calling, again, to each his own, for a very special type of person, but not for everybody, certainly. What other questions you got, sir?
Out of all the experiences you've had in your life, which was the hardest and how did you get through it?
What was the hardest? Wow, there's been a couple tough times, and I didn't talk a whole lot about resilience, but I do believe the 4 cornerstones of wellness are having spiritual, emotional, physical, and psychological balance in your life. And I learned this when I got back from Afghanistan. I weighed 138 pounds. Oh, yeah, 155 now. Can you imagine me that much lighter? And it was tough. I got back from Afghanistan, and within 1 year was divorced. I had never in my lifetime ever thought I would be divorced. How many of you guys come from divorced households? Look at you, I didn't want my boys to have, a single parent home. But the truth is my wife left and left me with 3 little boys, and I had to man up. The first thing that I wanted to do is go back to Afghanistan. I'm like, I'm going to go back where it makes sense to me, I don't want to. And, for Ranger School and Airborne School and Air Assault School and the War College, they don't teach you how to pack backpacks and make lunches and go to, parent-teacher conferences. I had always been a very involved dad, but learning how to be a single parent was a whole different challenge for me. And it was something I had to really demonstrate humility and ask for help, from people who I probably wouldn't have ever asked for help before from. But that was a difficult thing, still is. But, that was tough. That's probably the toughest thing I've had to do. And I'd like to say that, giving up brigade commands and multiple tours and going back as a ranger and all of that was easy for me. But it wasn't. Giving up my ego, giving up my ambition to stay home and do the right thing was hard. And, of course, all good deeds are rewards unto themselves. And I've been, obviously paid back many, many times over for having made that decision and watching my boys grow and thrive now. Thanks for asking that question. What other questions you got? Sure, go ahead.
What did you specifically do in Afghanistan?
What I was responsible for is, just very quickly, is once the Northern Alliance had completed its usefulness against the Taliban, we realized that many of these militia groups are not the nicest guys out there. It was my role to go around the country and disarm them and return them to their civilian lives. That was not an easy thing to do. There's some stories that go along with that, too. They don't like giving up their guns there very much, I can tell you that. Nobody wants to be the last person to hand in their gun, the weapons. But it was tough. That was a tough mission. So I was geographically isolated most of the time that I was there. Didn't get to talk to my family hardly at all. And physically very demanding, 60 pounds of weight on my shoulders, walking 20 to 25 miles a day was a lot. So plus at altitude, 12,000, 14,000 feet. We could tell you more about it in some other time, but. We all done? Time?
We got about 4 minutes.
4 minutes? God, we'd have waste 4 minutes. Like I said, my challenges for you guys are to go out there and just be great at what you do. Go to college, graduate from college, get master's degrees, and be participants in society and bring the rest of your generation with you. I have great hope and admiration for the challenges that you have ahead of you, and I know that you're going to kick in the ass the whole way. Remember that the military is led by civilians. The Secretary of Defense is a civilian. The Secretary of the Army is a civilian. The President, our Commander-in-Chief, is a civilian. We are entirely dependent as a subordinate service to the civil authority of this country to the judgment and teamwork and leadership of our civilian elected officials just like you. So Maine has the second highest per capita population of veterans in the country. We have 150,000 living veterans in this state. Maine has always provided a lot of leadership to the military, and we're entirely dependent upon sound, rational leadership at the civilian level. So again, it's a moral obligation how you go forward and lead. For us, we don't have a choice. We go and fight where we're told to go and fight. So I appeal to you to be those leaders that use sound judgment in the expansion of our blood and our wealth in this country. That is all.
Let's give a round.